In this last video, we're just going to look at how to simply turn an RGB LED on and sort of how that works. So we're not going to push ourselves with coding aspect too much, but we are going to look at the circuit and how it relates to these three LEDs. Okay, so let's go ahead and change the color of some of these LEDs. Let's change this one to blue, this one to green, and our first one to red. Why I'm doing it in this order is because I want to show you sort of how the RGB LED works. So we're going to come in here, we're going to disable our code or hide the code window. We're going to go into components and basic, and we're going to find our RGB LED. Okay, it's this little white one, and we're going to drag it onto our board. What we can notice here is that we have a red column or a red pin. Okay, we have a blue pin and a green pin. These are called anodes. These are where we can have the electricity flow into the component. And then we have a cathode, which is called a common cathode. This cathode is shared by all three of these lights. So pretty much put simply, an RGB LED is just a single LED with three little small LEDs or diodes placed inside. So we're going to return our cathode by clicking on the pinhole and dragging a wire or jumper wire up to our negative return line. We're going to color that black. And then we're just going to simply match this to these pins here so we can see sort of how these turn on and how the light here changes. So let's go ahead and drag another pin out from pin 13. We'll drag it there. We'll go from pin 12 and we'll go from pin 11, sorry. I'm just going to color these just to help us. So let's go with red and red. Okay, I'm just coloring the same jumper wires from the same pin so that we can follow things a little easier, and I'll go yellow and yellow. Oops, I accidentally clicked there, so let's delete that. And I want that cord right there, so yellow and yellow. Okay, so I need to bridge this gap with a resistor, so I'm going to click on my resistor, and I'm just going to hit Control D on my keyboard to duplicate it. Oops, that didn't work. Let's try Control C and Control V. There we go. Okay, so we're going to copy and paste this resistor a few times, and let's get started. So let's hit Start Simulation and see what happens. So we can see that red happens. We can see that blue is turning on at the same time and green's turning on at the same time. That's pretty cool because we're sending out data on pin 13, 12, and 11, and they're turning on the individual lights or the separate channel of the RGB LED. So that's a pretty cool little feature, a good way to understand what this RGB LED does. But the nice thing about an RGB LED is you can mix the colors, so you can actually get more than these three colors. So let's hit Stop Simulation and think about what has to be done in our code to do this. This function turns on a single channel, and while it's good for the purposes of using a single LED, it's not going to work for our RGB LED because we need to turn multiple pins on at the same time if we want to mix color. So we're just going to leave that function there. It's not bad, but we're just not going to use it right now. And we're going to get rid of these function calls. We're going to have to create something that can take in different variables, and depending on if a variable is on or off, turn on a pin. Okay, so let's go ahead and maybe do something very simple here. We'll go to the bottom of our code. We'll write a new function called void light RGB. We can sure we spell everything out correctly. We're going to open and close our function, and then we're going to open and close our curly braces for our code, and we're going to write some code in here. First thing we need to do is figure out how do we turn multiple pins on at once, and how many pins do we have accessible to us. Well, in this RGB LED, it's pretty simple. RGB, red, green, blue, we have 3 pins, okay, 1, 2, and 3. So we just need to be able to modify those 3 pins at once. And because these are hardwired in, I think we should hardwire in our pin for the learning point of this video. So we'll go digital write, and we're going to call pin 13, and we're going to call it high, and we're going to copy that. We're just going to copy that a few times for our other pins as well, and we're going to switch the 13 to 12 and 11. Then we're going to ask ourselves, or the Arduino, to delay for a second, and then we're going to copy these 3 lines above us. Okay, we're going to clean up this code in a second, but we're going to copy this code and set the values low. Okay, a really good thing to do when you're coding is sort of take it piece by piece and get one piece working before you add a layer of complexity. So let's hit Start Simulation and see if our code actually works. Okay, nothing's happening. So I'm going to hit Stop Simulation, and I use this as a particular example because when something doesn't work, the first thing you want to do is go through and read your code top to bottom. Okay, I know these are good from the last video. I know I'm setting my outputs on pin 13, 12, and 11, but look what happened here. I forgot to actually call this function light the RGB. So let's go ahead and call light RGB, and we're just gonna call it like that and hit start simulation, and you'll see we get this weird color light. Okay, and because I'm calling all these pins, you can see the channels that I'm turning on. So I left this hooked up like this so you can actually see the mixing channels. So we're sending red, blue, and green, and we're getting this weird sort of whitish light color out. Okay, but it doesn't show it up as white on our computer screen. So we're gonna hit stop simulation. So we need something here to turn our light on, and because we're just looking at on and off, I think we're gonna add our variables here for the actual light itself. So we'll write the light, we'll wait a second, and then we'll turn all the lights off to get ready for the next function call. So let's go ahead and call this red. Let's call this one blue, and let's call this one green. Okay, so those are going to be our three arguments, and because they are high or low, we're going to call those booleans. So a bool, and we're going to call red, and we're going to do another bool. We're going to call blue. Sorry, I'm trying to do the same order, and then a final bool of green. Okay, oops, sorry, I should have capitalized that. So we have a red boolean, and boolean just means true or false, yes, no, 1, 0, and in our case, high and low. And we're going to use booleans for red, blue, and green, these three channels. We're going to wait a second, then we're going to turn the light off. So then up here in light RGB, we actually have to call this function with three arguments. So we're going to call it, and let's just say we want to turn red and green on at the same time. Well, let's simply type in high, comma, low, comma, high. My red, my blue, and my green. And then I'm going to hit start simulation and see what happens. So you'll notice that red and green come on at the same time, and then that generates a yellow mixture. That's pretty cool. What's happening here is I don't have the off working because I forgot my delay statement, and that's why we just get this constant yellow. So let's go ahead and stop simulation. Let's add my delay statement in, and let's try start simulation once more. And you'll notice that when red and green turn on, we generate the yellow color. So if I wanted to, I could stop the simulation. I could call this function a second time, and let's go with low, high, high. Okay, so let's turn on blue and green and see what happens. So we know that when we send our red and our green high, we get yellow light, but what happens when we turn our blue and our green on? So let's start the simulation. So there is that mix, and when I turn blue and green, I get this cyan color. Okay, that's pretty cool. So I'm going to stop the simulation. I'm going to leave this here for you, and maybe play around with this, call the function a few more times with different combinations, see what other light colors you can generate. And that is sort of the limitations of what our function can do here. We can't actually mix it any more, we can't mix it in any more of a controlled fashion to generate some other colors. We can't change the frequency based on how we've sort of done this, but it allows us to sort of understand how different diodes inside this RGB LED can be turned on in different sequences or in different combinations to generate different colored lights. Thanks for following along in this video, and in the future our videos should be a little shorter. Thanks.